Good evening, my friends. I hope this message reaches you somewhere quiet, somewhere you can listen not just with your ears, but with the part of you that still believes that truth, even when buried, can rise again. Tonight, I want to take you far from the cities, away from the polished headlines and political noise, to a place most of the world never speaks of, a place where red dust hangs in the air and the wind itself carries the scent of dry earth and iron, a place called Galgouli. It sits on the edge of Burkina Faso, close to Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, and for most of history it was little more than a forgotten border post, an empty mark on the map, where the idea of the state faded into wilderness. But everything changed when a young leader decided that a border is not just a line drawn by rulers, it is a pulse, a living proof of whether a nation still breathes. For decades, the people here lived in uncertainty. The border meant nothing. It was crossed by traders, smugglers, refugees, and men with guns who came from nowhere and vanished into the bush. The government was a rumor. The night belonged to others. Yet one morning, beneath a blinding sun, a new structure rose from the dust, solar panels gleaming like shields, fresh paint glistening in the heat, and a flag fluttering where none had stood in years. Computers hummed inside new rooms, and for the first time in memory, Galgouli had electricity, water, and order. People came from surrounding villages just to see it, their faces reflecting something long forgotten: pride. To an outsider, it might have looked like just another construction project. But for the people of Burkina Faso, it was more than infrastructure, it was a declaration. The state had returned. At the heart of it all stood President Ibrahim Traoré, a man who spoke not in long speeches, but in actions that echoed through silence. His message was simple: sovereignty begins at the edge, not the center. It is not measured by the power of your capital, but by whether your flag still means something where your borders fade. In Galgouli, that belief took form in steel, glass, and sunlight. The new post was powered entirely by solar energy, staffed by young Burkinabe officers trained to operate biometric systems and real-time data networks. The old paper ledgers were gone, fingerprints replaced suspicion, and digital records replaced rumor. Each entry, each passport scanned, was a small act of control reclaimed from chaos. But technology alone was not the miracle. The real change came in what surrounded it. For the first time, villagers had access to clean water through new boreholes. Women fetched buckets without walking for miles. A clinic reopened. At night, lights glowed across the dirt paths, powered by the same sun that scorched the day. People gathered under those lights to talk, trade, and laugh, a sound Galgouli had not heard in years. For a country that had watched over 30% of its land fall beyond state control, this was not just progress, it was rebirth. The opening ceremony was quiet, almost humble. Soldiers, engineers, and local elders stood side by side under a sky pale with dust. Children waved small flags. An old woman whispered that she had waited her entire life to see her country return. When the sun climbed higher and the panels shimmered, the hum of the first working generator filled the silence. To anyone standing there, that low vibration sounded like a heartbeat, the pulse of a nation reawakening. Across Burkina Faso, the moment was symbolic. Here, in one of the most dangerous regions of the Sahel, the state had chosen to plant its flag, not in the comfort of its capital, but in its most fragile frontier. News of Galgouli spread fast. Some celebrated it as a model for Africa's future. Others questioned it. European media outlets framed it as a migration control project, another tool funded by international agencies to regulate movement. But in Burkina Faso, the people saw no foreign flags, only their own. They saw water that ran, lights that stayed on, and officers who spoke their language. For them, it wasn't about geopolitics. It was about dignity. When the West fortifies its borders, it calls it safety. When Africa does the same, it's called control. That irony was not lost on Traore. He said once that partnership without equality is submission, and that Africa cannot rise by asking permission. In Galgouli, That philosophy had become stone and steel. But nothing in the Sahel stays uncontested for long. Rumors began circulating through encrypted channels, claims that the post was a surveillance base, that it stored foreign data, that soldiers there had betrayed the revolution's spirit. Smugglers complained their routes were gone. Extremists saw a threat to their movement. Propaganda flooded social media faster than the truth could catch it. Intelligence reports reached the capital. Armed groups were probing the area. Traore's response was swift and public. Burkina Faso, he said, will defend every inch of its land. Reinforcements arrived discreetly. Patrols increased. The flag at Galgouli stayed high, a bright mark against the horizon. Every day it remained standing was a small victory for sovereignty itself. Weeks passed. The threat didn't vanish, but something unexpected happened. Life returned. Traders reopened stalls near the post. Drivers took new routes, knowing soldiers guarded the roads. The market buzzed again, and the quiet sound of human routine replaced the silence of fear. One local woman told a reporter, "Before, the government only came to punish. Now it brings water and peace." That sentence spread through radios and cafes across the nation. In a place long abandoned, the people had rediscovered faith in their own state. Analysts in Ouagadougou began using a new phrase, presence as policy. They argued that Burkina Faso was learning what many powerful nations forget. You don't fight extremism with bullets alone. You fight it by existing where fear once ruled. Galgouli became a symbol of that presence. Every functioning border post, every clinic reopened, every solar light installed whispered the same message. The state remembers you. And when citizens feel remembered, they defend what they have. The government started hiring young men from nearby villages to work as guards, technicians, and data clerks. For them, a stable salary was more than income, it was belonging. When peace starts to pay, people protect it themselves. Soon the model began to spread. Parliament debated it fiercely. Some accused the government of turning one success into propaganda. Others argued it was the most practical plan in years. One lawmaker stood and said, "Every unguarded crossing is a gift to the enemy." The motion passed. New posts were approved. The experiment of Galgouli had become national policy. And beyond Burkina Faso's borders, its neighbors took notice. Ghana pledged to upgrade its northern crossings. Niger and Mali began discussing similar smart frontier systems. Even the African Union cited Galgouli as an example of human-centered security, security that protects without oppression, that gives as much as it guards. Still, the challenges were real. In the north, villages continued to fall to insurgents. Thousands fled their homes. Critics warned that a border project cannot feed the hungry or heal the wounded. But the government insisted that development without safety is impossible. You can't build schools if roads are not secure. You can't open markets if bandits rule the paths. Traore called it a circle of survival. Security feeds development, development feeds peace. In Galgouli, that circle finally began to close. Solar grids powered schools. The clinic received vaccines stored in solar fridges. The same infrastructure that guarded the border now kept children healthy and mothers safe. Then the outside world looked closer. Western think tanks wrote reports about the Burkina Faso model. Some praised its independence. Others saw it as a quiet defiance of Western oversight. For decades, aid and control had come together a package deal. But Galgouli showed something new. Progress born of cooperation, but owned entirely by the local people. It was proof that Africa could secure itself without supervision. That thought unsettled many in foreign capitals. They had long assumed that sovereignty was too heavy a word for small nations. Now, Burkina Faso was proving them wrong. Across Europe, policymakers struggled with contradiction. They applauded the stability the post created, yet they worried that it signaled a shrinking Western role in the Sahel. The same funds meant to shape Africa's borders had instead strengthened Africa's independence. The irony was complete. In Washington, one analyst said, "If this model spreads, the entire balance of influence in West Africa could shift." And maybe that is exactly what it was doing, because when a country learns to protect itself, it also learns to choose its friends differently. Inside Burkina Faso, the story of Galgouli became something of a legend, a parable told on radio stations and in classrooms, a small forgotten town that became a symbol of sovereignty. A reminder that statehood is not a gift, it's a daily choice to show up even in the hardest places. But progress comes with responsibility. As more posts were planned, civil groups asked hard questions about privacy and power. Could biometric data be abused? Could technology meant for safety become a tool of surveillance? The government promised transparency, enacting new data laws and inviting auditors. For Traore, true independence wasn't only about control, it was about restraint, about proving that an African state could wield modern tools without losing moral ground. Months turned to a year. The lights at Galgouli still shone every night, soft against the dark horizon, powered by sunlight captured during the day. If you stood there now, you'd see trucks passing, children playing near the water taps, officers checking documents under fluorescent glow. The hum of electricity has replaced the echo of fear. That sound, quiet and steady, may be the most revolutionary of all, because in a land once defined by absence, continuity itself is victory. By 2025, the government had announced plans for 12 more border posts modeled after Galgouli. The initiative was called Reclaiming the Edges. Each would combine solar power, data systems, and community programs, a fusion of defense and development. Construction began, not with foreign contractors, but with local workers using local materials. Every wall built became a brick in a larger message, that Burkina Faso's sovereignty would no longer depend on anyone else's permission. And so, on nights when the wind carries the scent of dry rain and the horizon glows faintly orange, the people of Galgouli look at those lights and remember what was once impossible. They remember the years when the border belonged to no one, when fear spoke louder than law. Now they watch their flag wave gently under the same stars that witnessed their struggle, and they know that something sacred has returned. Sovereignty, after all, is not an abstract word. It is the simple right to sleep without fear, to draw water from your own well, to see your children grow where they were born. The story of Galgouli is still being written. The Sahel remains fragile, and the storms beyond the border still gather. But in this small corner of West Africa, one truth stands firm. The state has come back, and the people stand with it. A border once forgotten now shines like a beacon, powered by the same sun that burns over every continent. And perhaps that is the lesson the world should remember, that even in the quietest, most overlooked places, freedom does not vanish. It waits. It waits for someone brave enough to return and say, "This land is ours again." And when that voice finally speaks, when the flag rises once more against the dust, even the wind seems to pause and listen.